Thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez for helping to support the channel. So I've recently been making a bit more content about Doctor Who lore and fan theories. So when I saw this Eckhart's Ladder video, I was inspired to do the same about the Blue Box show. I went on Twitter and asked for your own theories and headcanons about Doctor Who, because it's interesting to see the ideas individuals have about the show, since it's a very big community. Obviously, I won't necessarily be tearing these theories apart, because contrary to popular belief, I don't hate all fan theories ever. I'll just be looking and analysing some pros and cons of these ones, since some are actually pretty good and can be supported pretty easily by evidence within the show. It goes without saying, but there are potential spoilers for pretty much all of Doctor Who up until Power of the Doctor, so keep that in mind, and now let's see what the community has cooked up. The Decaying Master in The Deadly Assassin and Keeper of Traken is the direct successor of Missy. I think this is an interesting theory. So in Classic Who, in The Deadly Assassin, we were introduced to a really horrendously burned and decayed version of the Master who was rescued from a planet by another Time Lord. And it's usually accepted that this is because the Master ran out of regenerations and is trying to cling to life. But obviously, we never know the Master's true timeline at this point. So I can definitely see that it would be some kind of survival of the Missy Master, because in The Doctor Falls, it was supposed to be implied that she died for good. So I can definitely see it happening. It's kind of hard to lend credibility to it, because Big Finish kind of wrote it into stone that Missy regenerated into a better incarnation called the Lumiat. So it's hard to kind of then say that Missy is the Decaying Master, but I like the idea. Also, Alzarius is Gallifrey. Sticking with Classic Who, at one point the Doctor aims for Gallifrey and then it turns out to be a different planet because they're in E-space and it's just in the same position as Gallifrey. It's just in a different dimension. So I can see this kind of being accurate, but I feel like the planets are way too different to be the same. It's like having a Mars in the place of Earth in another dimension or whatever, you can't really then call it Earth, because it's a completely different planet. And also, we don't want any kind of implication that Adric is a Time Lord. The Toclophane are futuristic versions of the Cybermen. So as you know, I love the Cybermen. They're one of my favourite monsters in all of Doctor Who, so any kind of Cyberman theory will always pique my interest. And I think this one has a lot of legs to it, because they are very similar, with the whole augmented human and shared consciousness kind of vibe. But I feel like the time span kind of portrays the theory, because it's supposed to be almost immediately after the events of Utopia is when the Master goes and makes all the humans into Toclophane. But it does kind of seem possible that they would augment themselves to survive, but I don't really know whether they have the materials to do that on their own. And also, I don't want to retroactively have another finale where the Cybermen are just stuck to the Master. But I want to believe this one, because there are those similarities of humans encasing themselves in this armour and dehumanizing themselves to try and survive. And that's kind of what the Toclophane are. So, I'll give a cautious thumbs up to this theory. The Doctor is a trinket hoarder. I think this one is kind of the most obvious of them all. I feel like it's not even really headcanon, it's just kind of shown to be true loads of times throughout the show. The Doctor's always pulling out these random devices and things that they've just collected or been given. They seem to just love having all these things. And in terms of a trinket room, we can kind of see that in Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, where, there's that storage room of a bunch of random stuff. I feel like that can kind of be seen as part of a trinket room. So I feel like, yeah, if anything, this one, it's less even of a headcanon and more just established fact within the universe, because the Doctor's personality lends itself very well to hoarding trinkets. So yeah, a big double thumbs up to this one. It's just kind of goes without saying. This one comes from my Discord mod Blobfish, and he says the heavenly host from Voyage of the Damned are just the robots from Robots of Death in Christmas costume. And this is another one I pretty much agree with. I think I mentioned it in my Voyage of the Damned review way back in the day, but they do have very similar designs to the Vok robots in Robots of Death in Classic Who, but they're just kind of gold and have angel wings this time. I've never understood why they didn't even reference it in the story, because they have very similar faces and, you know, there's the whole death robot aspect of them. I feel like, yeah, they are a slight variation of the exact same robot. They're not from the same place, but, you know, in the future, who's to say those robots won't be sold across the universe like the Ood, you know? So, yeah, this is another one I heavily agree with and support. It's easy to headcanon, so, yeah, big agree with that one. The Doctor never truly loved River. I've never been shy about how much I just don't really care about River, so I would always be willing to entertain the idea of something like this. There's always this weird imbalance in their relationship where River knows everything about him and he doesn't know anything about her. So I kind of feel like right from the beginning when he met her, he was almost under this expectation that he had to go on this route. So, you know, regardless of what happens between them, it always seems like the Doctor's just there because it's written into his fate that he has to be. And it does seem like the Doctor never truly loves her. But he obviously cares about her, but they just never really have that. Like, she obviously loves him. Well, I think that's undoubtable. But there's just always something a bit off about them together. And yeah, I know Moffat was always trying to force it in that, you know, they really did love each other. And, you know, I feel like 12 showed more love and affection towards River than 11 ever did. He just seemed to be just having a good time rather than actually loving her. And, you know, I can't even blame him because she's a horrible person. And she mistreats him and abuses him all the time. So yeah, I just feel like it comes down to one of those things where he feels like he has to because it's his role in this timeline. And yeah, I again, double thumbs up to this one. The reason different incarnations don't get along is because it's one of the few occasions they get to express their own self-loathing. Yeah, I think this one is just, again, kind of obvious. It's seen in Day of the Doctor when they're trapped in the prison and they have that discussion about the children of Gallifrey and stuff, and it kind of gives you a sense as to the guilt that they share for what the War Doctor did. So I feel like it kind of makes a lot of sense that the Doctor would always just hate being put in a room with another incarnation, because it's like having another person who still has everything else about you. And yeah, I'd say a thumbs up to this one. It seems quite accurate. Like, obviously they don't hate each other all the time, but the Doctor, especially in the newer incarnations, has always been very, very guilt-ridden and self-loathing. So it makes sense that when you put them in a room with an earlier version of them or a future version of them, they won't get along because they'll just project that self-loathing onto themselves. So yeah, thumbs up for this one. This one is from another one of my Discord mods, Professor Dynamo, and she says, Xenomorphs properly and fully exist in the Doctor universe. Alien exists as a movie in the universe because H.R. Geiger had a real-world encounter with the Xenomorphs, which is where the ideas came from. I'm mixed on this one. So we do know for sure that some fictional media is because of events that happened in the Doctor universe. But I think Xenomorphs may be a bit of a stretch because of how brutal they are. And to say H.R. Geiger had a real-world encounter with a Xenomorph, I feel like it would have to be an encounter where the Xenomorph got crushed by like an iron beam or something, because I can't see how H.R. Geiger would have managed to survive that otherwise. But I do like the idea that Xenomorphs exist in the Doctor universe, and obviously they are referenced in Last Christmas because you have the dream crabs, which are similar to facehuggers. So there are similarities, and it would make sense that maybe the dream crabs have like a cousin species of the Xenomorph because of the facehugger aspect. But I think it's a little bit too much of a stretch for me personally to get behind. I feel like the Xenomorphs wouldn't really fit in the Doctor universe because they're too overpowered almost. So yeah, not my cup of tea, that one. All the different continuities for the 7th and 8th Doctors still exist because of the Time War. Yes, I'm going to do a big agree with this. So, if you don't already know, after Doctor Who was cancelled in 1989, they split into books, and then there was the audio dramas of Big Finish, and then there were comics, and nothing really stuck together in a coherent way, especially when they brought back Doctor Who and, you know, introduced the Time War in that gap. So, you know, you just have this huge 16-year gap almost of stuff that makes no sense if you try to fit it all together. But then you have something like the Time War where, timelines and dimensions were being changed so constantly, then it makes sense that, you'd have these aborted timelines or parallel timelines where, you can fit all these events in quite well. So yeah, I'll agree with this because, Doctor Who continuity has always been an absolute mess. You can never make things canon or not canon. So there definitely are ways to make sure that these pieces of media are still parts of a coherent timeline. Double thumbs up to this one. Yet another one of my Discord mods, Alternate 13th, says Kara from Survival is actually Benny. Yeah, so basically, if you're out of the know, there was a character in the last Doctor Who serial Survival called Kara, and she was played by the same actor who then went on to play Benny Summerfield, who was essentially the original River Song, who was like an outer space archaeologist who had her own audio spin-offs and book series and everything. She was like a big deal. So a lot of people have always tried to kind of find a way to say it was the same person, but the difference is one of them's a human and the other one's a cheetah person. So yeah, I can't really find any leeway, especially because Kara dies at the end of Survival. I suppose you could say, that was at the end of her life because we still don't know what happens to Benny Summerfield in the grand scheme of things, or, if we do, there are conflicting accounts because of stuff I was just talking about. So maybe if you were really creative, you could find some way to say that, in the end of all her journeys and whatever, she gets converted into a cheetah person and somehow doesn't recognize Ace, who she spent a lot of time meeting and traveling with at times. So there's not really any way to work with that. So yeah, rare thumbs down in this video for that one. Jackson Lake is a younger version of the human scientist Doctor Who. So if you're unfamiliar with the Peter Cushing movies of the 60s, they were alternate universe retellings where the Doctor was a human, so obviously this suggests that Jackson Lake eventually ages into the titular Doctor Who, because his name was literally just Doctor Who. I think that the main issue with this is that it just doesn't really add up with the timelines, because it's implied at the start of Doctor Who and the Daleks that the human Doctor Who is from contemporary Earth, and I know it's the 60s, but Jackson Lake was already in his 30s, 40s or whatever when the next Doctor took place, so there's no way he'd be able to live longer. I suppose you could maybe say it was his son. That would be a potential answer, maybe. Who knows? But, it's all a bit too messy. The timelines don't add up. So I like the idea that Jackson Lake becomes Doctor Who because of his adventures with the Doctor, but it just doesn't really match up with anything we have to work with. Instead, I personally prefer the idea that the Doctor Who movies were adapted from Ian and Barbara's memoirs after they returned to Earth. They wrote the stories of the Doctor as a fictional thing and changed the elements, and he was a human and everything like that. And that's where it came from, because that was originally the plan for Day of the Doctor, and I believe the Day of the Doctor novelisation has a part about it. So I prefer that to suggesting Jackson Lake adopted the moniker of Doctor Who. So yeah, double thumbs down for this theory. The planet that Caves of Skulls take place is on Skaro. The Doctor just goes forward in time and doesn't travel in space. This is a really interesting theory and something I didn't ever really think about, because there's nothing in the show's first serial that says they're still on Earth. Literally, there's nothing. I know it's a whole caveman thing. I know on a meta level it was meant to be on Earth because it was meant to be historical, but there's nothing actually saying that it was meant to be on Earth. So it is entirely possible that we were just watching them go to a much, much earlier primitive Skaro. And I love that idea. I love the idea that they just go forward in time and end up, they haven't actually moved in terms of space, and they're just on the same planet that is now full of Daleks. The Khalids and the Thals or Dals or whatever you want to call the humanoid species before Daleks, they look like us. So there's nothing saying that the Tribe of Gum weren't just very, very primitive Skaro people. So yeah, I personally love this, and I think it's a really unique theory. So I'll give it a definite thumbs up, and we'll go with that, because yeah, it's just something so simple that it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that was just kind of a casual look at some of your own personal fan theories and headcanons. I know it was a very different video to usual, but I've been so busy working on bigger videos recently that I wanted to do something a bit simpler and less scripted to change things up a little bit. If you like this kind of looser style, let me know, because I might make more stuff like this in the future. And be sure to comment your thoughts about the theories I talked about in this video. It would be interesting to see all your opinions, along with your own theories and headcanons. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. And an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Platinum level patrons Maximilian Foreman and Nyx Games, and all of my Gold level patrons Boots, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Francois AK Line Vortex, Herna Furzog, and Luke_SY. Thank you so much for your support.